Alright guys, so welcome to today's tutorial video. In today's tutorial video, we will take a look at this World Combat system right here, alright? So, you guys have probably seen it, but in the previous video, some things were not really visible in my opinion. So first of all, the sounds, alright? So I wasn't really able to record the sounds because I forgot to enable, my PC sounds in OBS, and you're not able to hear the sounds, and I find that they fit perfectly into this whole sword system right here. Okay, so I really like the sounds, and I did not upload them, they're not mine. I've took them from the toolbox right here. All right, also one more thing in the giveaway video. So once I have slashed, the player stood still. All right, so the player did not do this idling animation it does now. I forgot to add that, and yeah, so I just re-added that just so you guys know. But yeah, let's take a look at how this thing is done. All right, so first of all, we are working with client replication right here. So we have the Katana client, then we have a remote event, which is then being fire server. We have the Katana server, which does some server stuff, but we'll get to this soon. And then we have the client replication, which, reacts when this server script right here fires to all clients. Okay, and then the Katana replication script basically just replicates all of the Katana stuff on each client so that the server is not drained by its performance or anything like that. So let's take a look inside of this Katana client local script. So what exactly happens? First of all, we have a variable called player. And yeah, this is pretty obvious. So game players, local player. So we have a variable which basically just refers to your player right here, to your local player. And then we have a repeat and until right here. So basically wait is being repeated until player.character exists. So we are basically waiting and pausing this whole script until the player has its character loaded, okay? Because the character doesn't load right away, especially when we work with local scripts. So local scripts tend to load faster than the client does, and then when you try to refer to the client within a local script, although the character hasn't been loaded yet, you will run into an error, and that's the reason why we wait until the character is fully loaded. And if this is the case, then it just gets out of this repeat where it just waits until this happens, and then we move on with this part. So we have a variable which then refers to this character. We have a variable which refers to this Katana remote right here. So game get service replicated storage, wait for child Katana remote. And then we have something called current state, which is old, which is deprecated. So I tried some different approaches on this one, and we can delete this one. Okay, so that's unnecessary. Now we have a fire server right here. So we refer to this remote event and then fire server, and then with this argument called apply Katana. So let's actually get to this one. So let's get inside of this server script right here. So the server script then reacts to this fire server. So we have the same remote event reference right here, and we have another reference, another variable called damage indicator. So if you haven't seen my damage indicator giveaway or tutorial video, then I highly recommend you to check that out, because I have explained everything in depth inside of those videos. Well, to be honest, inside of the tutorial video only, because the giveaway video itself is just there to lure all of these leeches to watch the tutorial video later on, right? So remote on server event connect function player what. So that's the part where the reaction happens when this remote event has been fire served. So it reacts then with a on server event, and two arguments we receive is the player and this thing called what. So the player is automatically being passed, so we do not even need to add the player inside of here. And what, so this part right here basically becomes the first argument of your fire server, okay? And I like to call this one what. I would even love to call this one task, but apparently when you write down task, it is already a syntax, so it is already preoccupied. So let's stick with what. And I use this because it basically tells the server on server event right here what to do. So we are now able to categorize everything. So if what is apply Katana, then we can do this. If what is attack Katana, then we can do this. If what is check for enemy, then we can do this, so we now have a few categories right here, and they're all indicated by this single what argument. Now if what is apply Katana, which is what is right here, then we fire all clients. So this remote event right here, we fire all clients with this what, so with this first argument called what, aka task called apply katana, and a second argument is the player. Okay, so if you haven't seen my video on client replication, or if you don't know anything about it, let me just briefly explain the idea to you. So since we have filtering enabled, the client is separated from the server, so everything you do on the client isn't necessarily happening on the server, unless you use remote events and then make things happen on the server. Now the problem is, when you do stuff like effects, attacks, whatsoever on the server, you're basically draining the server's performance. Now to outsource this thing, you could basically just fire server to the server and then tell the server to fire to all clients, means to all players, and then to make the same attack happen on each player itself. So the players still see everything they are supposed to see at the same time and at the same extent, but the only difference is that the things are happening on the clients itself and not on the server anymore. It means the server's performance isn't being drained, but the client's performance is being drained, all right, which is far better than the server's performance being drained. All right, that's the idea behind of that, and we can do this because of filtering enabled, and this is basically what we're doing right here. So we're now applying this katana on each player, on each individual itself. Now, it is very, very important when you work with client replication to really specify who the performer of this attack, of this action is. In this case, we have the second argument called player, all right? So obviously the player who has fire server to apply katana also becomes the performer of this action. And that is important, that you really, really clarify who the performer is. And that's what happens right here. Okay, so the second argument is the performer. Now let's get inside of this katana replication script and let's take a look at this apply katana thing. But before we do that, let's actually check out these two lines. So remote is obvious, and this is the so-called on client event, which happens when you have fire cliented this remote event to this specific player right here. Yeah, in this case we are using fire all clients, means you do not really have to specify which player you're fire clienting to, because you're fire clienting to every player. But yeah, so this is the exact opposite of on server event. So on server event is for servers, on client event is for clients, all right? So that's just to give you a short explanation on this one. Now, if what is to apply katana, then we are applying the katana. And as you can see, I have called the second argument performer right here, just to emphasize my point from before. Now, what happens right here is that we are creating a new variable called katana, and then we are referring to an instance called katana inside of the replicated storage, as you can see, and then we are cloning this one. Now let's actually take a look at inside of this katana model right here, because it is pretty important that you understand how to prepare these sword models in order to be, you know, to use them inside of this sword combat system, because this katana model right here is, or might be something you do not want to use in your game, and you might want to use your own stuff. So how can you, add your own stuff to this one? Now it is pretty important that you have one main part right here. In this case, the main part is the handle for me. So this persimmon colored part right here with this fabric texture. And it is very important that first of all, now let me select all of the parts right here, so all of the mesh parts. As you can see, they are all can collide faults, they're anchored faults, and well, they're not maskless, but that's not really necessary. So what you have to do is that you have to size them correctly. So when the size is perfect and when they all have been positioned perfectly, all you gotta do is that you have to add weld constraints to these so that they do not fall apart. Now, how does this work? You basically can place the weld constraint in the katana itself or in the part itself, so the part you want to weld. It doesn't really matter. The only thing which matters is that part 0 is always this main part, okay, in this case the handle, and part 1 is the part you want to weld to the handle, to the main part. In this case, I have this thing called 2, which is just which are just some details for the handle, and I want to weld this one onto the handle itself. So what I do is that I select part 0, I select this katana handle as part 0, and part 1 becomes my detail right here. And I do this step for all of the other parts as well. So freeze this part or these parts, and the blade itself is the blade itself, and you just have to use weld constraints, and then that's it. Now, if you want to use trails, all right, let me enable this one. Let me make these visible. Now you can actually see them. So if you want to use trails, I think that the usage of them is pretty obvious. But if you do not know how to use them, then just create 2 attachments. So attachment and attachment 2. Place the first attachment right here and the second one right here. I think that you can even do this vice versa. I'm not really sure. You just have to test it out. And then you just create a trail instance, and then you select the attachment 0 and attachment 1 to your first attachment and to your second attachment. And then if you want to, you can add your own texture. I've added my own texture. As you can see, I have, you know, uploaded a bunch of trails right here. And now, yeah, you can feel free to use your trail, as you can see. Yeah, that's basically it. I just recommend you, if you use trails, then make sure that they are disabled by default, because we want this trail only to appear when you slash, all right, and not when you have the katana in your hand and you're just moving around. That's something I used to have in my old game back then, my Pirates Voyage old game, and it looked awful, but I didn't really know how to disable it. Now let's take a look back again inside of this katana replication stuff. So we are cloning this katana model, we are putting it inside of the performance character, and then, this is very important, we are creating a weld inside of this katana. It doesn't necessarily have to be inside of the katana itself, so you can imagine this step the same as with the weld constraints, alright? So the weld constraints, they do not have to necessarily be inside of the smaller part you're trying to weld onto your main part, but, well, I personally recommend it, I like it. I like to do it that way. But the thing which is still the same is the concept with part 0 and part 1, alright? In this case, we are creating this weld to weld the katana onto our left hand. So in this case, the left hand is our main part, alright? And the katana is the part we are trying to weld something onto, alright? So if you have trouble to really understand this concept of part 0 or part 1, then think about it this way. So when you pick up an item in real life, then the item does not pick up you, but you picking up the item. So I hope that this was clear. So the item is not picking up you as the person, as the human body, but you are picking up the item. It means you are the main part. So your hand, which picks up the item, is the main part, all right? If it would be vice versa, means the item would be the main part, then the item, who is the main part, is picking up you, who is the part 1. You know, makes no sense. That's the reason why this concept right here is being done. So part 0 is your left hand and part 1 is the item you're trying to pick up, means the katana at the end. Now, W.C1 basically just, you know, apply some C-framing on it, so C-frame that angles to rotate it. So you rotate it by 90 degrees on the X-axis, and then we apply another C-frame which moves it a little bit down, a little bit to the front. I'm not really sure anymore, but, you know, so those are just some C-frames I've applied to make the katana fit perfectly inside of the hand. So you probably have to play around with your own C-frames, because you might be using another katana model. If not, then hooray. Yeah, right here we have a variable called loader. Now this is also very important. I have 4 animations in here total, all right? And what happens right here is that we are applying an animation called katana idle walk. So wait, let me start from scratch. So we are referring to the performance character, then to its humanoid, and then to an animator instance inside of the humanoid itself. And then we are able to load an animation via this animator instance. And the animation we want to load has to be referred to inside of here. And the reference is clear, so script katana idle walk. So this thing right here. And then we are making this loader play. Now, it is very important that each of your animation... Wait... Let me show this to you. So let's take a look at this one, all right? So this animation is called katana idle walk. I've called it this way because it is your idling animation, but also your walking animation, so everything at the same time. Now, if you have that kind of animation as well, then I recommend you to set the animation priority to movement. That is very, very important. If you do not set it to movement, if you set it to action, for example, then your legs will not move while you're walking, all right? But if you set it to movement, then every other part which hasn't been touched by you inside of this animation editor will stay normal. So they will just adapt to the walking animation, to your idling animation whatsoever, all right? That's what movement does. Now, if you take a look at the other animations I've made, so katana attack, but also attack 2, attack 3, so they all share the same priority, then make sure that the priority is also set to movement. right? So the lags, for example, that they attach to the idling animation, to the walking animation you're currently doing while slashing, all right? And please check out this cool trail. Look at it. Very, very cool. Yeah, that's just something I wanted to tell you so that you guys know about it. All right. And that's when how we apply the katana to the to the performer, all right? Now, let's take a look inside of, where is it? Yeah, katana client. Now, let's take a look inside of this port, because that's the port which is also very important when it comes to attacking with this katana. Now, what happens right here is that we are referring to this user input service, okay? And we are applying, now we are checking, we are looking out for a function, not a function, for an event, I'm sorry, for an event called input began. Now, when this event happens, then we receive two arguments, all right? Input and GPE. Now, for those of you who do not understand what input began means, input began basically marks the beginning of an input. So an input can be mouse input, means you have pressed your mouse button, your left mouse button, or you have pressed on a key, or you have pressed on a gamepad, all right? So those kinds of inputs. And when you have started to press on one of these inputs, then this event is being fired. This event does not tell you whether you have let go of it yet. It only tells you whether you have started to press it, okay? Now, input is clear, so the input you have done. GPE stands for game processed event, and this basically tells you whether this input was done on purpose or not, so whether this input was done while interacting with in-game elements or not. Now, if not, GPE means if you have not been interacting with something else while doing this input, then we can tell that you wanted to do this input on purpose, and then can move on. Okay, and this checks for input basically. So if input user input type equals anim user input type mouse button 1. So mouse button 1 is your left mouse button. Now, what this basically tells you is that if your input equals mouse button 1, so your left mouse button, then we want to fire server with attack katana. Okay, that's all what happens right here. So this part basically checks whether you have pressed your left mouse button. If that is the case, then we fire server this remote event with the task to attack katana. So to attack with the katana, obviously. Now let's take a look inside of here. Nah, not this one, I'm sorry, inside of here, yeah. Alright, so I've also added a cooldown to this one, and I did not add a cooldown which is client-sided, because that can easily be bypassed by exploiters. But I've added a cooldown on the server side. So right here, let's check this out. So what happens when this attack katana fire server happens is that we are checking if there is no instance inside of the script called player name, so the name of the player, attack cooldown. So these two strings added up to each other. So if there is something inside of the script called your player's name, attack cooldown, then this right here will not happen, okay? And let me explain you what this instance does. So this instance is created as a cooldown value. So as long as this instance is inside of your script, you won't be able to attack. If this instance is not inside of your script, then you will be able to attack, all right? It is that easy. Now, when this instance is not inside of your script, then we do this fire all clients thing again, but this time with attack katana, and then once again with the performer. And then we are also creating this instance, which is, by the way, an int value, and yeah, and which only lasts 1 second, okay? So this second, so this 1 second, right, you can change this to 2, to 3, to 4, but also to 0.5, 0.2, whatsoever, and this marks the amount of time you have to wait in between each swing. Okay, so very important to keep that in mind. So if you want to reduce the cooldown or increase the cooldown. Now let's take a look back inside of this katana replication script. So that's one important part right here, okay, attack katana. So what happens right here is that, first of all, we're checking if this is the task, but also if the performer has an instance inside of its character called katana. So remember, we have cloned this katana and we have put it inside of our character, and that's a requirement so that this katana has been equipped and exists inside of the character, okay? Now, what happens right here is that we have a swing sound. Okay, let me play it. Yeah, you guys have probably heard about it. So we are cloning this, we are putting it inside of our performer's character, we are playing it, and we are destroying it after 2 seconds. That's all what happens. Now, right here, we are enabling the trail inside of our katana. And we are adding a coroutine, so coroutine resume, coroutine create. So we are creating a coroutine inside of a coroutine resume. So basically, that might be complicated to you yet, but what happens right here is that this part, so this wait, which would have delayed the script if we wouldn't have wrapped it inside of a coroutine, this happens in the background. So this does not pause the script, yields the script whatsoever. It doesn't do that. It runs in the background and does its job. So after 0.5 seconds, we are setting the trail back to false. That's all what happens right here. I think that we should even lower this to 0.35, but yeah. Okay. Now right here, we are looping through all of the playing animations of our animator instance, so of our character basically, okay? And if any of those animations is our katana idle walk animation, then we stop it. So the idea behind of this is that we do not want our attack animation to overlap with our katana idling animation, walking animation. That's the reason why we have to disable this katana idle walk animation before playing another animation, so that both animations do not overlap. Okay, I hope that this was clear. And right here we have a table called attack anims, and this table holds all of the attack animations which are available. So we have 3 in total, and you just have to refer to them. So script katana attack 1, katana attack 2, and so on. Okay, and what happens right here, so this loader, so that's the exact same thing which is up here, with the slight difference that the reference now is different. So the reference now is that we refer to the table and then just refer to any random index inside of here. So from 1 to all of the total amount of entries. So from 1 to 3, and from 1 to 3 at this point, and it just picks out a random number from 1 to 3. So 1, 2, 3, or yeah, just a random number out of these, and then just refers to it. So attack anims, let's say 2. Okay, then it would pick out this reference, or attack anims 3, then would pick out this, and so on. So I hope that this was clear. So the animation which is being played now is randomized. So that's what I'm trying to point out at the end. Now, this one is important for the damage dealing stuff. So if game player's local player equals your performer, then we want to fire server this remote event with the task check for enemy. I'll get to this soon. Well, let me just quickly finish this part. So this loader, okay, so we are waiting for it to stop, and then once it has stopped, we also wait additional 0.5 seconds until we make this katana idle walk animation right here play again. Okay, so this additional 0.5 seconds are just there because it looks bad when you swing and then immediately go back inside of that idling animation. All right, that's the reason why I've added those additional 0.5 seconds. Now let me tell you why I've added this check. Okay, now imagine you have 3 players. Okay, 3 players in game. One is the performer and the other 2 are, yeah, just normal players. Okay, now imagine I wouldn't do this check. Okay, what would happen? So it would fire server this 3 times. Okay, and that's the problem. We only want this to fire server once. And if this would have been fire server 3 times, then we would have this code right here, which basically looks out for an enemy. So this would run 3 times, and then it would detect the same enemy 3 times and would deal the damage 3 times. Okay, that's a simple reason why. And what this check does is that it basically checks that the player right here, who is the owner of the script, of this local script, so the local player, is also the performer itself. Okay, and if that is the case, then we fire server. Okay, and this ensures that this fire server happens only once. Now, what does this check for enemy do? So what this does is that, I've already told you, it checks for any nearby enemies and then just deals damage, plays a sound, clones those blood particles whatsoever. Okay, but let's get into depth and then I'm gonna end the video. So we are setting up a ray basically. So ray settings. So we have to create this raycast params.new, so this template you guys know about. And this template now has to be filled with settings. So the filter type, for example, which is blacklist, the filter descendant instances, so basically the instances you want to filter out. And in this case, we want to filter out every instance of our character so that our character is not being detected by this array. Now, once you have done this, it's time to set up the ray. And you do that by referring to the workspace and then colon raycast, and then you have to, as you can see, start by inserting the origin, so where your ray starts and where your ray ends, so the direction right here. So yeah, basically the direction your ray heads to, and then the last argument are your ray cast params, aka your ray settings. All right, so I start at the performer's humanoid root parts position, and then the ray goes from, yeah, the ray just goes from the same point, but just in the direction our humanoid root part is looking to, multiplied by 10. Okay, so basically the direction we are looking into. Now, if something has touched the ray, intersected the ray, so if something is in front of us and yeah is in contact with the ray, means if ray, and this something is inside of a model, and this something contains a humanoid, or let's say that the model of it contains a humanoid, then we can tell that this something has to be an enemy. Means either an NPC dummy or a player's character, right? So a character model at the end. And if that is the case, then we have a bunch of stuff right here, and that's something I really have to tell you as well. So this part is not client-sided and not client replicated, but I think that it is okay because it isn't really that much. So what happens is that we only clone particles and make sounds play, and that's it. So there's nothing else which really would mess with the server's performance. So we have this particle emitter called blood. What happens is that it is being cloned, it is being put inside of this ray instance, so basically the instance which has touched the ray, and then it is being destroyed after 1 second. Now, what also happens is that we have something called sword hit, so sound, we clone it, we put it inside of the ray's character model, the character model, which is our enemy, we make it play, we destroy it after 2 seconds. And this part right is about dealing the damage. So we are having a variable which just randomly pulls out any number from 5 to 20, and once that is done, we deal damage to our enemy's humanoid by using this take damage function with the amount of damage, and then we are using this damage indicator right here to indicate the damage. All right, so I highly recommend you to check out that video because I've explained this damage indicator stuff there in depth. Now, with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, share this video to all your friends. Leave me feedback in the comment section, guys. Take care and see you in the next video.